is about as Westmont as you can get. He went to Westmont, met his wife at Westmont. His oldest son and daughter went to Westmont and married Westmont people. And he's got one kid left, and the pressure is really on. Rick is a trustee. He's been an entrepreneur, been self-employed since he was a student here. So he's been doing very interesting things. He got his degree in business and economics here from Westmont, went on to the University of Kentucky for an MBA, has degrees from Oxford, has worked with illiterate poor women in Afghanistan and Iraq to register them from voting. He's fought against HIV/AIDS. He consults with corporations. And he's just about as humble and tender-hearted a man as I've met. I love to be around Rick. He's one of those people that I'm embarrassing him right now, but you just sense the presence of Christ, and God has been pleased to use him as a trustee here at Westmont. He's chairman of our Bright Hope for Tomorrow campaign. There's so many good reasons to have him here, and our general theme of the semester on leadership. What could we do better than to ask Rick Ifland to speak to us this morning? So let's welcome him. One of us.
Thank you, Ben. Oh, I need that.
Oh, that's yours.
Do you want to move that? Wow, what an introduction. I don't know what you just learned about me, but I just learned that I'm old. It's true that when I first arrived on campus, I think the Dead Sea was merely sick. So I'm glad that at least Ben thinks I'm still relevant. About 3 months ago, he called me and he asked a really strange question. He said, "Hey, Rick, do you believe in free speech?" And I said, "Well, yes, Ben, I do." And he said, "Great. How about giving one in chapel?" "Well, what would you like for me to speak about?" I asked. And he said, "Well, how about leadership?" And so that's what we'll do, sort of. I say sort of because I am really curious about 3 issues that you're going to face over and over and over again in your lifetimes. Issues, candidly, that I and my generation screwed up. So I'm curious about how you're going to respond to them. The first issue that I'm curious about is oneness. What are you going to do about oneness? According to the World Christian Encyclopedia, there are an estimated 22,000 Christian denominations, not churches, denominations around the world. Os Guinness writes that under the influence of the modern world, the historical accident of denominations has become a theological disaster for anybody believing in one church. We know that it's an error for Christians to make relative what God has made absolute, but it's equally an error to make absolute what God has left relative. What's the result? The result is a terribly fractured body that's in desperate need of healing and unity. If so many of us profess to live by the gospel, yet deliberately choose to be so uninvolved with our neighbors, and so at odds with each other within the body, is there something wrong with the gospel? Or does the problem lie with us? G.K. Chesterton summed up my generation. He said, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried." Sadly, there's something so profoundly right about his statement. So I'm really curious about how you are going to respond to oneness. The second issue I'm curious about, I'll call "Don't Touch My Junk." And I don't mean overeager TSA employees at LAX. Though I am tempted to make a hard left turn here and just let all the young men in the audience know that probably most of the problems that you'll face in the future are in your pants. Think zipper and wallet. It's been said that 80% of all men struggle with lust, which proves another statistic, that 20% of all men are liars. But I'm not. But I'm not focusing here on your zipper. I'm focusing on your wallet, your money and possessions, your other junk. And that goes for all of you, young men and women alike. It's been said that the world's population will exceed 7 billion people this year, with 1 million more people added each week. Technology allows us to reach all of them at a fairly low cost, yet over 3 billion people live on less than $2 a day. What an incredible time to live out Isaiah 58 and other passages, to feed the hungry and to clothe the naked and to offer a cup of water to the thirsty. Yet, we're not focused on our 3 billion neighbors, are we? Some of us worry about having time but not enough money. Others feel they have money but not enough time. Isn't it ironic that in the midst of our material abundance, we have such spiritual poverty? My generation has just numbly followed the crowd, not sure where it's headed, and so we've drifted along, so easily carried by the tide. Ladies and gentlemen, my generation has largely failed to think about how to best marry our faith into our work, or into our communities, or into our homes, or into our junk. We've largely gone through the motions of an unexamined life. In fact, our best response so far seems to be halftime, essentially admitting that we've ignored the important stuff for the first half of our lives, but now we're going to do something about it. So I'm curious about how and when you're going to deal with your junk. And the third issue that I'm curious about is time management. These days we talk of work and leisure as if they're opposites. Work is important, leisure is play. Work is drudgery, leisure is enjoyable. Work is for compensation, leisure is free of charge. But a moment's deliberation provides evidence that this is not so. Far closer to the mark is that in today's world, we have twisted things so badly that, as Dr. Guinness would say, today we worship our work, we work at our play, and we play at our worship. I'll say that again. We worship our work, we work at our play, and we play at our worship. So I got to ask you, is that good time management? Aren't we called to be before we're called to do? If so, we have it all backwards, don't we? So I'm curious about how you will manage your time. All right, so what do my curiosities about oneness and junk and time have to do with leadership? Well, the short answer is I don't know, because leadership is a tricky thing. In fact, it has tricked authors into providing over 850 definitions of leadership, and from my view, most all of them are off the mark. A more considered response about oneness and junk and time and their relationship to leadership is that as you navigate through life with the gifts you've been given, and you've been given a lot, leadership will directly intersect your relationships both inside and outside the body, and that relates to oneness. Leadership will also cause you to deal straight up with how you manage your time, because there'll be seemingly so little of it, and with your junk, because there'll seemingly be so much of it. In fact, I think your generation will receive the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. So I think maybe we should spend some time this morning thinking about these things and how they relate to each other. You should also realize that we're not alone in thinking about these things. There's a lot of white noise out there, a lot of very confused people who are writing books on the subject of leadership, or they're organizing seminars on leadership, but they don't seem to have much of a clue about leadership. Most are quick to spout off that leadership is about taking charge, or it's about influencing people, or it's about being out front making noise so that others will follow. Candidly, I think most of them have it all wrong. So I thought that maybe instead of just adding to the noise, I'd provide you this morning with a few new thoughts that you're not likely to find in any of the books or the seminars, and that might actually be helpful. Would that be okay? Well, for me, the most serious phrase in the entire Bible is follow me. Follow me, Jesus said 2,000 years ago, and he changed the course of history. And he changed how I view life, and I hope that he changed how you view life. What may be lost on you up to this point, but hopefully won't be lost on you after this morning, is that this two-word phrase, follow me, is actually the first step of eternally significant leadership. That's what's missing from the hundreds of books and thousands of seminars on the subject. Follow me causes us to look at leadership in an entirely new way. So here's what I think. You will never rise higher. You'll never rise higher than when you choose to follow, not knowing where the path may lead, as long as the leader is Jesus. Look at Philip in Acts chapter 8, a Jew's Jew. When believers were scattered from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria, two very different places from each other and extremely different from Philip's upbringing, Philip lands in Samaria, and his ministry is a huge success. In fact, it's so successful that it attracts the attention of the big boys, Peter and John, who decide to leave what they're doing and travel all the way to Samaria to see what's going on. And soon thereafter, in verse 26, God taps Philip on the shoulder and he says, "You're done here." Well, I don't know about you, but man, if that happened to me, I'd be royally, I'd be mad. So what is God's next instruction to Philip? There must be some great news, right? I mean, after all, look what he's done in Samaria. Well, here's his next instruction. Go out to the desert road at the edge of town and hang a left. That's the entire marching order. Go out to the road and hang left. Gee, God, thanks. Well, do you remember the rest of the story? He meets an Ethiopian eunuch who is reading but not understanding Isaiah, especially the part about this future humble ruler who Philip knows as Jesus. So Philip explains it to the eunuch, and soon thereafter, we have the first convert to Christianity from the continent of Africa. He just also happens to be the right-hand man of Queen Candace, the ruler of Ethiopia. What you may not know is that today, in 2011, there are still some believers in Africa that refer to Father Philip, because he's the one that first introduced Christ to their ancestors. Do you think they refer to him as Father Philip because he was a great leader? Is it because he received detailed instructions from Jesus to be the first evangelist to Africa? No. It's because he obeyed. It's because he went out to the road and he hung a left as he was instructed, and the world's never been the same since. I guarantee you there is not a leadership book or seminar that uses Philip as an example of leadership. So I would argue that the books and the seminars have it all wrong, that they're misleading you, and they don't even know it. By the way, Philip's not alone. Look at Moses or Joseph or Noah or Abraham in John chapter 21. Among the final discussions that Jesus has with his right-hand man, Peter, Jesus tells Peter about how he's going to die, adding in verse 19, "Follow me." What did Peter do when he discovered that he would be dying by crucifixion? It'd be difficult to say what was going on in Peter's mind, but he looked around and he saw John, who always seemed to have favor with Jesus, and he asked, "What's going to happen to this guy? How is he going to die?" And Jesus replies in verse 21, "If he never dies, it doesn't matter to you. You follow me." We forget that when Jesus calls, he calls us one by one. Comparisons with your roommate are futile. Speculation about others, they're a waste of time. Envy about the success of your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother, they're as childish as they are evil. We're each called individually, answerable to God alone, to delight in him alone, and eventually to be approved by him alone. If you're ever enticed to look around or want to be your teammate or be your professor or use the progress of others to weigh against your own achievement within your own calling, you'll hear what Peter heard. It doesn't matter to you. You follow me. The key is to follow the call of Christ despite the uncertainty and perhaps even the chaos of your current circumstance. And if you do that, I think you might just have the storyline of your life. This will allow you the freedom to be single-minded without being fanatical. It will allow you to set wise goals and make wise choices. And as you make your unique contribution along the lines of your gifts, and as your friends do the same, you get to celebrate together because you're bearing fruit and you can enjoy a restful peace in the outcome. Your gifts get to be used for the purpose for which they were intended. And you get to rest in the comfort of doing what you can without ever pretending to be anyone but the little person that you so plainly are. C.S. Lewis pointed out, the more we get what we now call ourselves out of the way and let God take us over, the more truly ourselves we become. The alternative is the real disaster. The more you resist God and try to live on your own power, the more you become dominated by your own upbringing and your own surroundings and your own natural desires. So the intention of your gifts is for service. It's not for selfishness or power. Instead of listening to the world say, you are what you do, maybe you should probably now start thinking, do what you already are. And then Jesus comes by where you are, and he taps you on the shoulder, and he says, you, follow me. It's up for you to work out with him how you're going to do that. How are you going to follow him? Well, regarding oneness, in 1 Corinthians 12:25, it talks about harmony among the members of the body, so that all the members care for each other equally, unlike our often juvenile denominational biases today. But oneness is not limited to the church. What about oneness in your section? What about oneness with your suite mates or your roommates? Eventually, what about oneness with your spouse? It's ironic that this morning I got a call from one of my brothers last night. He got in an argument with his wife, and sometimes he calls me just to vent, and probably because he knows I'll just listen. The argument wasn't that big of a deal, and I'll just tell you what it was. His wife wanted the electric blanket turned on last night, and he didn't. Okay, so it's a pretty small deal, except that they live in the Ozark Mountains of northern Arkansas, and I think it's been 10 days since the temperature has been above 32 degrees. So she was cold. What you have to realize about him is that he could go year-round wearing a T-shirt. And so I just listened. I'm hopefully smart enough not to take sides. And then I asked, well, how are things going this morning? And he said that his wife has spent the entire morning staring at the kitchen window. And I thought, the silent treatment. And I said, that's not a good sign. He said, yeah, and if it gets any colder, I'm going to have to let her back inside. On a more serious note, Dallas Willard said, things will go right in society only to the extent that a sufficient number of qualified people, that would be you, are strategically positioned. He goes on, justice cannot prevail until there are enough people who have Christ's power and his character. Character, by the way, is the foundational element of Dr. Beebe's upcoming book. It's on leadership, and he challenges his readers to have their character in sync with their deepest held convictions. This actually is a book worth reading when it comes out in December. Well, again, according to Willard, the key to understanding your part in the grand scheme of things is the realization that God only moves forward through people who will receive his instructions freely and who will willingly cooperate with him in the next step. Can you now begin to see why I'm curious about how you intend to respond to oneness? And what of messing with your junk? One of my dearest friends is a partner in the largest private equity firm in the world. He's one of a handful of people who just worked on one of the biggest corporate transactions in history. If I said the name of the company, every person in the room would know exactly what it is. Anyway, he's formed a lifelong habit that he dubbed no Bible, no breakfast, no Bible, no bed. And that's exactly what he does. No breakfast in the morning, no matter how hungry, until he's spent time in the Word. And no sleep at night, no matter how tired, no matter where he is in the world, and he's all over it until he's spent time in the Word. It's his way of developing his relationship and forming a healthy habit of excelling in that relationship with his Creator, even as his day job is messing with a lot of junk. By the way, John, he's viewed as a phenomenal leader. The truth is that he also rests in the comfort of doing what he can do without ever pretending to be more than the little person that he so plainly is. And you and I are supposed to do the same so that God can use us like he's using my dear friend John. For me, in almost 50 years of life on earth, and after looking at the 2,000 plus passages on money and possession, here's my conclusion about junk. Either you serve God and use money, or you serve money and use God. It really is that simple. Isaiah 2:8 warns that the land is filled with idols. The people bow down to worship these things that they've made. So I think that the choice you have is either don't mess with my Creator or don't mess with my junk. Can you now start to see why I'm curious about how and when you're going to deal with your junk? And then there's time management. Jesus' life was a rhythm. It was a rhythm of public engagement and private retreat, of work and rest, of crowds and then solitude, right in the midst of one of the most hectic public lives ever lived. T.S. Eliot wrote, "Can a lifetime represent a single motive? If the single motive is to obey God's calling, then the answer is yes. And the example is Jesus. In any and all situations, both today and for as many tomorrows as you've been given, God's call to you is the ultimate how, what, when, where, and why of your life. And if you accept that call, then you have both the time and the ability to accomplish the task. After all, didn't God give you quite enough time and all the resources that are needed to do what he expects you to do? I don't think that he's shortchanged any of us. Obedience, then, is a yes to God that allows you to say no to the unhealthy distractions you're bombarded with, allowing you finally to see the storyline of your life and unriddling the meaning of your existence in a world that's attempting to pull you in another direction. Hopefully you can now start seeing why I'm curious just a little bit about how you'll manage your time. Well, for me, here's the bottom line. You are my younger brothers and sisters, and I want you to know that this planet, it's all jacked up. And your role in it, no matter what it specifically is, your proper role in it will engage people for eternal significance. 7 billion people, most of them hurting. That's the collective challenge for you and your colleagues sitting next to you. So I'll put this as simply as I can, and I hope you don't mind me being so direct. It is factually misleading. It is morally hypocritical. It's spiritually ineffective. And it is psychologically dangerous for you to think that you can navigate this life on your own power or by your own leadership. No matter what the shallow books and deceptive seminars would have you falsely believe, you are a follower. You need a leader. Matthew 23:10 offers a warning about those of you who are going to strive to do it on your own. It says, "Do not be called leaders, for one is your leader, that is Christ. And don't let anyone call you master, for there's only one master, the Messiah. So if you ever want to be placed in a position of true leadership, where all the eternally significant stuff happens, then you need to take the first step of leadership. And that's to be the best follower that you can possibly be. Look, I know you're eager to make a difference. I know that. But please, 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 don't blow through this stop sign. It's where leadership begins. And it's a step that can never be cast aside. Remember Chesterton's quote? "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting," he said. It's been found difficult and so left untried. I dare you to give it a try. I dare you. The best part is, if you believe that victory is yours in Christ, and if you believe that this is not your home, then death is an upgrade, right? And every day on this side of the grass, it's an opportunity to serve. If you choose to do that, just like Philip, where the leader sends you, quite frankly, it's none of your business. So my prayer for you is that you safely place yourself in the Father's hands for real. And once there, that you simply choose to follow. And in following, that you deliberately decide to live a dangerous life for Christ. He's awaiting your availability. So as for me, I'm really curious and I'm really excited about how you'll respond to his call. Thank you.